Hi everyone and welcome along. Now, so many of you loved the pebbles, so we're going to go back to the beach and paint some seashells. So grab your paints and let's get started. So yeah, these shells are various ones that me and my mum have sort of picked up along the way. Oh, you can still feel little bits of sand coming off, even though you clean them off. And the colours are just incredible and really lend themselves to be painted in watercolour. And last week, if you haven't already seen, I painted some pebbles that we'd seen on the beach, and they just were so beautiful and relaxing. And you absolutely loved painting it. So today we're going to do the same. So let me just dust that off from the sand. And I can show you here that we've got a T formed in the middle of the page. So my page is about 7 inches wide, and I found the centre and I've done a horizontal line 2 inches either side, and then down the middle the T is just a bit longer than 3 inches. And what we're going to do today is we're going to draw a heart shape and paint the shells in the heart, because I don't know if you know, but there's a little holiday called Valentine's Day coming up soon, and I thought, well, let's combine a creative project with a possible card making idea. So I've got my compass and I'm just going to find the middle of this line here. Whoops, it's funny, whenever I do compass on camera it always goes a bit wrong. But I've just about managed to salvage that there. And then we're going to do the other loop across the top. So if you're ever wondering how to paint, or how to draw even, a nice symmetrical heart shape, well, you want to try starting off by creating those loops for the top of the heart with a compass. And then obviously each heart, I might make that a little bit shorter. You sort of know when you're drawing it in whether it feels right or not. But essentially we're just doing this for a very loose guide, because we are going to fill up this heart shape with all kinds of lovely shells and paint them in this lovely arrangement. So get your heart shape drawn. If you've got any shells lying around, maybe grab them and we can get painting. So I'm going to probably do a lot of this with my medium-sized brushes. I've got a size 2 right here, and I've just woken up a few colours in my palette. Of the blue sort of cold tones, we've got Paynes Grey here, then I've got some Prussian Blue, which is a beautiful blue, some burnt Sienna, and some French ultramarine blue. It's just a little bit more royal bluish. And then over here I've also mixed up permanent rose, cobalt violet, cadmium orange and yellow ochre, because all these tones appear in these shells, and that's the beauty of them, really, is just the amazing range. So I'm going to start with a little mussel shell first, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint these as loosely as possible, so I'm not going to be sort of drawing in the shape too much. Just like with the pebbles, I really want to encourage you to try finding ways to embrace sort of the loose watercolour style. So I've got the shape there, and I have actually allowed a little bit of unpainted space in there, and I'm just, the great thing is having the real thing in front of you. You can see there are these amazing curvy lines, but what I'm doing is I'm just allowing the paint to dry a fraction, so that when I paint in some stripes, there is actually going to be just only a little bit of feathery blend, but most of the colour will stay put. So let me see. I'm just sort of playing around with a sort of Paynes Grey and burnt Sienna mixture, and really taking most of the colour off my brush, and then we'll just add in a little bit more of the just pure burnt sienna, because I can see it lurking in there, and then maybe a tiny bit more of the really deep dark Paynes Grey, and I think that is a rather nice mussel shell. Now, I don't know the technical term names for all of these shells, so there's going to be some sort of Harriet made up names also lurking in amongst the more technically accurate ones. So we're always looking for places on the heart shape where the curve of the shell might sort of complement the actual point on the heart. And of course down here, I'm just wondering that might be a really good one for the base of the shell. So I've got some yellow ochre here. And I'm going to create that shape still with my size 2 brush. And I'm just going to fill it in with water a little bit. I'm going to pick up the tiniest bit of Paynes Grey off the side and starting by just using pretty much the water that is on my brush. And now, as you can see, it sort of wants to travel. We don't want too much bleed and blend, but also what is going to happen with the bleed and blend is it is going to dry quite a lot lighter and paler, so we don't have to worry too much if it's travelled a bit further than we like. But what I will be doing later on is adding in maybe a few more stripes once it has dried, and we'll get a few more slightly more defined lines, so we can leave that one for a moment. I quite like the swirly spiral shells, and to me there's a bit of purple, hint of purple in that. So I've got my Cobalt Violet, but I'm going to add in some yellow ochre, and I'm just going to place this one down the side here, and just with my brush creating these little S curves essentially, with a little bit of unpainted space in between. And then grabbing in just a little bit of the shadow. So you can see with these loose, because these are loose watercolour shells, I'm really looking for all the colours in them, and knowing that when those colours dry, they dry quite a bit lighter. Okay, let's try one of these amazing spiral shells. So I'm going to take a sort of combination of Paynes Grey and yellow ochre and just sort of start swirling my brush around. And then I can see there's a bit of a stronger outer shell colour over the top. And then it's just a case of sort of really looking at what you've got there and seeing ways in which you can depict that in watercolour, and try to sort of do it as simply as possible. And we've got one of these beautiful little fan shells, so I'm going to again begin with this sort of mixture of the yellow ochre and Prussian Blue, Paynes Grey and yellow ochre. Now if you prefer to draw in the shapes first, then go for it. I'm trying to encourage us to be as loose and as free as possible. I actually think there's going to be a bit of red in this as well, and a bit of more pure burnt sienna. But we do need to start off with our lightest colours first. So I'm going to start with a sort of central line and just using the unpainted space to create the lines. And if the actual shape of your shell around the edge isn't quite what you wanted, you can just keep going back in. We'll just start to drop in a few little bits of colour, because it's very important to get this blend whilst it's still wet. And then continue on the other side. I did do some, got hair on my brush, I did actually do some shells right back at the beginning of the YouTube channel in 2020, but they were a little bit more cartoonish. These are a little bit more realistic, but yeah, if you enjoy the sort of ocean themed things, then by all means go and have a little look. So I'm now going to bring that down in. Now I could start using a smaller brush here, but I'm also keen to show you that loose watercolour painting really is about being able to find control with the larger brush and embrace the sort of energy you get from fewer brush strokes with the larger brush. So you can just even up that shape there. Now we haven't had a go at one of these little limpets, so let's have a little look. Starting with a nice light colour yet again, and just going to try and weave it in there. Okay, so we're going to begin by I'm just going to dab colour around the edge to create that sort of texture that we get, and then I'm just going to try drawing it in to a central point and seeing what we get, and that's kind of nice. And maybe popping a little bit of colour in the middle there. I think it's all about the unpainted space, isn't it? All of these shells, it's where the paint has dried against a crisp white page that it looks really, really effective. So don't forget about that. Okay, and now the paint is starting to dry. Whoops, on some of these. We can have a little look back at ones like this. Taking the size 4/10 brush, which is part of your set if you've bought your brushes from me. So for those of you who don't know, the brushes I'm using are the Pro Art Master Stroke range, and they are my favourite brushes. They're synthetic, they're not particularly fancy, but I've tried all kinds of brushes, but what I like about them is the stiffness of the bristles for my kind of watercolour painting. And anyway, I'm so thrilled now that I actually stock them in my Etsy shop. So you can just check the episode notes below for the link to go get yourself a set, and then you can paint along with me and have exactly the same experience with your brushes. So you can see popping in those lines now just really helps create a bit more of a realistic shape. So I'm going to fill up the heart with shells of this kind in lots of different shapes and sizes, and then we'll come back and add a little bit more detail. So you'll get to a point where the page is very nearly full, but you might see there's just a little gap there or a tiny one there, and at that point I think we can pop in some of our little old friends, the pebbles, just little ones, just to help sort of fill up the space, because of course you nearly always find pebbles and shells on the beach together, but I think you don't need to worry to make it a 100% completely perfect shape. And now you could leave it like that. I think it's looking really beautiful. I love just spotting those tiny bits of unpainted space, allowing the blends to do their thing, but there might be one or two where you just want to add a tiny bit more detail, maybe a few little speckles on one or two, or a few more slightly more detailed lines. But I really encourage you not to go too far and to celebrate the looseness of what you've created, because you can suddenly lose the charm of the piece if you go in with too much detail after the fact. But if we've kept our colour palette nice and limited, and that has meant that as a piece it all ties together really nicely. I mean, I've been quite intrigued to just pop in a few little dashes on these limpets. So I found when I was painting it, this was the most useful shell for filling in awkward gaps, because it could pretty much take any shape it needed. So there you have a lovely loose seashell themed piece of art that just happens to be in a heart that might be handy for a little bit of a gift for someone next week, whether it's Valentines, Palentines, Galentines. It's just lovely to show someone that you care by creating something for them with your hands. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and if you haven't already checked out the Pebble project, then I highly recommend you do so. Okay. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating videos like these that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, then hit the like button, comment below to let me know how you got on, and don't forget to share it on social media if you are thrilled to share your painting with the world. And of course, if you never want to miss another video, then hit the subscribe button and that little notification bell just next to it. And I will see you next time. Bye!